Can someone say hi to see if my audio is working?
Hello.
Good, thank you.
Morning, all.
Good morning, David.
Morning.
Good morning.
All right, well, it looks like we might be waiting for one or two more people. I'm not sure, but we'll go ahead and get started since it's 8:30. Good morning, everyone. The first item of business on our agenda is the approval of the October minutes. So are there any questions or modifications there?
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
I second that.
Second,
All right, second by
go to
David.
Dave.
All right, all in favor of approving the October minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. All right, well, the next item is going to be the main topic for this meeting. If you remember, Seiju came and presented at the last meeting for the annual actuarial report, and Bill Dowd and Bill Reed are here to answer some follow-up questions that we had from that meeting, both to cover some sensitivity analysis and what that might do to the funding status if we experienced a market return less than our assumed rate of return, or if we had sort of a one-year downturn and recovered from there, just to help us with the conversation around our contribution rate and funding status and the sustainability goals that we have. So with that, I will turn it over to Bill Dowd and Bill Reed.
Thank you. You're on mute, Bill. You're on mute.
Can we share our screen? I don't think so. Can somebody share my slides?
I just enabled your access to share screens.
Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Yeah, after the last meeting, we had some conversation, and of course, we showed up at the October meeting with really good news, right? Because the investment returns for the year were really high, and it kind of makes everything look a lot better than it did a year ago. And when you carry that forward, it resulted in, a reduction in contribution rates over time, even though the gains are phased in over a 5-year period. And it shows a dramatic improvement in funded status over a 10-year period, which is all good news. But, one of the concerns with all of our clients that are in this position is that they take that to the bank and they decide that now, from budgeting purposes, they can fund less to their pension fund because everything's fixed and things are on a great path. So one of the things we discussed was, coming back and talking a little bit more about, what would happen if things didn't go exactly according to plan, and how far would you have to stray to get back to a position where, you weren't on track once again. So, we did a couple of scenarios. We talked to Jason and Sarah and a couple other folks and Chrissy after the meeting, and we decided we'd do some additional projections, which I'll show you in a second, and you all have copies of them anyway. But the first is to say, here's our baseline projection, which is what we showed you at the last meeting, is that our funded status improved to 70%, a little over 70% in 2021. And if every year we were to get a 10% rate, a 7.5% rate of return and make the required contributions over a 10-year period, the fund would be 100% funded, okay? Of course, we all know we never get exactly the same return every year, but that's sort of the game plan on which we've built our models, okay? And we still think all those assumptions are reasonable. And if that were the case, then the contribution rate for 2023 is 24.85%, which we showed you last year. And that's based on this year's that's based on this year's valuation. And that will continue to decline over time as we move forward, because we're kind of phasing in that 28% rate of return we got last year into the assets to develop the contribution rate. So we kind of smooth that in. So this would show a pretty good story for the city for budgeting purposes, coming down to 19%. And then after 10 years being around 16%, which is about almost 10% lower than it was last year, okay? So, that's the plan. That's, again, based on reasonable assumptions, we think is a good model to look at. But then the question comes is, what do you do for budgeting? Do you assume that this is going to be the case and move forward and feel like, okay, 5 years from now, we're going to have a whole lot of money that we can direct elsewhere because our pension fund is not going to need it? So we looked at, well, what happens if following the last year of really good return, we had a 10% loss in 2022, okay? Suppose we get to June 30, the market corrects again, and we're down 10% instead of up 7.5. Well, our funded status then drops from 70 to 61, okay? And our contribution rates now, because we followed a really good year with a really bad year, all of a sudden they're back in the 23, 24% range for the next 10 years, okay? So it's just kind of a shock to, it's a shock to the fund to say, okay, we were up 1 year. What if it turned around? We were down next year, and then we continue to get our 7.5% rate of return. Well, the answer is our contribution rate, it's not higher than it was, but it sure doesn't go down to 16%, okay? So it's one of the things, we thought was you just need to understand how volatile this could be based on investment performance, even though we're phasing in that big year, and we would phase in a bad year. Because if you look at the first couple of years of this, it's 24% pretty much on average, even if we lost 10% in year one. And if we go back to the first slide, it's 24 down to 19, right? It's lower, but it's not that much lower. But again, you could undo one really good year with one really bad year, okay? And we just don't want to lose sight of that when we think about budget planning and things like that. And then in the next slide, we just said, well, what if we're just off? Our long-term rate of return, we don't have a jolt, but we just don't get 7.5%. Suppose we average 6.5%, over the next 10 years. Where do we end up? Well, we end up with a funded status that continues to rise, but it doesn't go up to 100% over 10 years. It goes up to 92%, okay? Which is still a great place to be, okay? But it does that with higher contributions, still declining, but down to the 19% level instead of the 16% level, okay? So we just felt like, following the last meeting, you get the good news of what we did with the fund in 2021. You just got to make sure you understand that, hopefully it'll stay on course. We'll earn our 7.5 going forward, and things will be in accordance with that first slide. But in reality, if something, were to happen in the market, we could be back and then looking for money that you might have decided or allocated to other purposes. So with
Why
that,
is there
we'll just kinda-
Bill, why is there a 3-year lag in that second scenario?
in this one,
And the
No,
third scenario,
that one. The middle one. The
the
loss,
middle one.
that one.
Oh, because we have 28% return last year that we're only recognizing over a 5-year period. We're kind of phasing it into the rate. So if you go back to like the first slide, it would go down from 28 to 19 by the time that's fully phased in, right? Because we had a 5-year phase in that we picked up 1 year last year, but it's 20% a year. So we're phasing in the 28%. And if we lost 10, we'd still be phasing in the 28% and we'd start phasing out the 10%. Okay, so they kind of offset each other and they blend. So it doesn't drop as much until that first 28 is in fully recognized. And then the last year of the 10% loss is finally recognized. That's why it jumps up in 2027. But it's all about trying to smooth the rates because of investments being potentially very volatile.
Hmm.
And you got to be careful on this. I told folks the other, sent out another slide the other day because actually the scale on this goes from 21 to 26. So it looks like that's a huge jump, but it's 1%, whereas the other slides go from 0 to 30. So it's a different scale on this slide. I apologize for that. But at the end of the day, if you lost 10% in year one, your contribution rates are going to be in the 24, 25% range, you know, for the next 5 or 6 years. Not saying that's going to happen, but it could.
I think these are great tools, Bill. Thank you for doing them. And I think that they'll be great tools in telling the story of how we need to move forward in a careful manner. And perhaps we present this worst and best case scenario charts to say this is where we think things are if it goes well, and this is where we think things are if it doesn't go so well. And here's the range, and we need to protect the funding for the whole range, even the variance in the range.
Yeah, and I think it's also on this slide, I'll point out too, you know, if you have a jolt and you lose 10% and the funded status drops from 70 to 61, the plan is to still to get to 90% in 10 years, right? But to do that, it's going to cost you more money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's what makes you get there. So I mean, all you can do is manage the fund, do the best you can with the markets we're given. Hope the rest of the year isn't like the last couple of days. And, you know, just be careful when you budget. Because once the money goes somewhere else, it's kind of hard to get it back.
Bill, I know you can't run endless scenarios, but you've assumed a downturn in 2022. What if that downturn occurred in 2027 or 2029 or?
Yeah, I mean, if it occurred after the big gain last year is fully phased in, then you'd have a jump in rate the first year. You know, instead of here, you're showing the rate's still going down because we're phasing in good news from last year. But if the 10% loss happened out here, then you'd have this kind of increase in the first year, right? After that loss. And your funded status would drop that year. You might be on this, like if you go back to the first slide, you might be on this path and you might get to 84 and then all of a sudden be down to 75, right? Because you mark to market on that funded status every year based on full market value. And then you'd have to crawl back. So your contribution rate would start jumping up, you know, in the out years. So my guess, you know, outrunning all the numbers, you know, you might see a contribution rate go down to 19 or 18, and then all of a sudden go back up to 20 or 22 or 23. And your year at the end of the road, your funded status would now be probably 90-some%, low 90s.
Yes, one note here from a budgeting perspective. In any of these scenarios, we're not seeing a huge jump in the contribution rate, you know, higher than it is now. So this is actually looking better than I was worried that it might look. You know, especially over a 10-year period where maybe we don't achieve a 7.5% rate of return. It's still looking manageable for the fund, even though, I mean, obviously we would like to get to 100% as fast as possible. I guess one question I had was, you know, given that we have a 7.5% rate of return assumption, how many of your other clients are you seeing using a rate that high?
I think 7.5% actually is median. I think I'm going to show you that in the summary for state retirement system, whereas it was a year ago. You know, our public plans, we've got some at 7, some at 7.25. We've got one at 8. So you're not really an outlier. You know, we'll look at it again when we do a next experience study and get input from your advisor. In fact, I think they've got their presentation this morning, or at least you have a copy of the report was sent out. I don't know if you have a presentation, but you know, I get their take on where they think the market's going for the next 5 years. But you know, you're not an outlier. You know, the trend has been downward. It's interesting. The last several years, the trend's been downward. You know, from a median of around 8 to a median of 7.5 or a little bit lower. Of course, in the last couple of years, everybody's beat that, right? But you know, we're talking long term. We're not talking short term. So.
Ashley and Chrissy, do you have any particular perspectives on this? You're both close to the budget world.
You know, I think that I think what Jason was alluding to also is that these numbers are already in our base. And so given where we are, also given the idea that we don't know what the market is going to do, there's also a lot of uncertainty with what collective bargaining may look like. And if that could potentially have changes on the plan or requirements of the plan. I find this a prudent thing to do. If, to Jason's point, if something like this was going to add a bunch of dollars to the budget, then I think it's worthy of more conversation, but it's basically holding it level for the most part. We still need to run some numbers because this is based on a percentage, and as our payroll goes up, you know, it will increase some dollars. But I don't think it's going to be that material. I think it's a prudent thing to do. I think it's in keeping with what we promised to our employees. I think in an environment where our morale sucks, it's a good thing to say that, you know, we're maintaining our retirement. We're not that competitive locally right now. And so I think all these things put together makes this the right thing to do.
Any other questions for Sagio?
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Well,
thank
thank
you all.
you. And if you have any more questions, Jason or Sarah, just let us know.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think what we'd like to do is continue to work with Chrissy in the budget office to come up with a contribution rate that, you know, reflects these scenarios and reflects the possibility that we might see, you know, a decline in the asset value. And we just want to try to smooth out that contribution rate if we can. So great.
Do you need us for any of the other agenda items, Jason, or?
The only other one, I don't know if we want to switch the order. You all are familiar with the VRS
Probably want us
portability.
to talk about portability, I would think.
Yeah, maybe we could switch that and go on to that item so that Sage, you can be here to answer any questions about how those calculations are done. And then we can move the investment portion to the end.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great, then I'll just jump in and talk a little bit about portability. So I did attach to all the documents for the meeting, a little bit about portability, and hopefully you guys had a chance to review it, but I'm just going to talk about a few things from those notes. First of all, the portability agreement is referenced in city code. And the idea behind it is that, say we have employees who work for us for a period of time, at least until they're vested, and then they leave the city of Charlottesville and go to another locality, and that locality uses VRS for their retirement. The idea is that we don't want them to lose all their retirement with us. And so, and people who come from VRS into the city, same thing. So that they can get credit for their service with the city, they would transfer a certain amount of money from our plan into the VRS system and then get credit for those years of service. It's very important to know that during this process, say they have 10 years of service with the city, they may not get 10 years of service in the VRS system. So that's kind of key to the whole thing. So a little history is we entered into this portability agreement in 2004. and it was amended in 2017. So this is nothing that's new to the plan. And there were many reasons that the city entered into this agreement, but some of them were to help attract workers from other localities, to improve job opportunities, and to reduce retirement income loss for Virginia workers. So all kind of good things, right? Another important thing to know is that the accepting plan is responsible for communicating to its employees. So if someone leaves the city of Charlottesville and goes to another locality, then VRS is responsible for talking to them, for getting all the information, and for managing the process. And if someone comes from a VRS locality to the city, then it's the HR department's job to communicate everything to the person who wants to port their service. On our end, the portability agreement is referenced in all the materials we give to new employees. So when they're making their decision, because when a new employee comes, they have 30 days to make a decision between the defined benefit plan or the defined contribution plan. So that's part of the materials that we give them to help make their decision. It's in our retirement handbooks. And also, if any employee comes and asks on request, we'll talk about it and share any information that they need to make a decision. Another thing to know is that there are certain rules about it. So VRS has a few different things than we do. So in our plan, we require that a person is vested before they port their service. So a person would have to work here for at least 5 years before they can port their service. And then once they reach that period of being 100% vested, then they have 18 months from then forward to decide to port. Okay. Another thing that I wanted to make sure everybody knows is that it affects all employees for the city. I know lately it's come up with public safety a few times, but it does affect everybody, not just public safety. And something else, just as a point to know, is that it's very seldom used. So since I've been in this position, I haven't had a single person who ported their service. So even though people ask about it, it's not always something that they take advantage of.
Hey, Lisa, why is that, do you think, just anecdotally, why do people not take advantage of that?
I would say sometimes they think that they're going to get credit for all of the service that they had. And when they find out that they're not going to, they decide not to go through with it.
Are they actually having us run a calculation to determine that, or they're just sort of making that judgment before they actually get the numbers?
No, they get the numbers. So I will defer, because we have actuaries on this call, on how it's specifically how their dollar amount is determined. But basically, as an overview, it's an actuarial determination. So we're asked to put a dollar value on their benefit. So
Yeah.
I will defer to the actuaries on how that works.
Yes, it's an actuarial calculation. So we will get the lump sum amount from VRS, what they're going to provide. And then we take their salaries and project it to retirement under using our valuation assumptions, our mortality assumption, our salary scale assumption, our interest rate. We project what their benefit might be at age 65, and then divide by that lump sum amount to determine how much service do we think that lump sum amount that the plan is going to receive is going to translate to their benefit and give them service in that manner. And so it is an actual calculation. We actually have not done a whole lot of calculations either. We've done a couple of them. I think since the assumptions recently changed from the last experience study, we've done one portability calculation. And according to what Lisa just said, that person decided not to do it. But so it doesn't happen very often, but it is an actual calculation for us based on the valuation assumptions.
And I guess, the reason for that is the whole premise of this from the plan's perspective was that we don't want to be giving benefits that we don't have money to pay for, right?
Right.
And that's the problem. It's not really true portability where if you go here, you got 10 years and you get 10 years there and vice versa. It's more about if someone comes to the city or goes to VRS and they bring a pot of money with them, what do we think that will buy as far as a benefit in your plan? Because we don't want to give away something that wasn't paid for. And that's why it usually doesn't make sense. Because somebody might come in with 10 years of VRS and you tell them, well, we'll give you 6. And they say, well, never mind, we'll just leave it behind. Because, they might have a higher, they switch jobs, they might have a higher salary, whatever. And here, then they had a VRS and it translates into more costly benefit. So and it's something that was, I think the intent was really good, but there hasn't been a lot. It's not just Shawsville, it's all the other localities, not a whole lot of activity, a lot of calculations, but not a lot of movement.
How many people actually go back and forth like this?
I have no idea.
Yeah, that's hard to say because I don't always know when someone leaves where they're going. So I don't know if I can give a good answer to that.
I mean, if they're leaving,
If
the
they're going
state-
to public sector employment, every locality in the state is in VRS, right? There are only 10 or 11 independent systems. So if they're going to counties or cities or whatever, chances are they're going to go to a position that's covered under VRS. But it's not necessarily true, but a lot of, like Albemarle County, if they go from the city to the county, they're going to be in VRS, right? So that would be the opportunity for them to transfer some service credit. So if they go to private employment, then there's no.
Yeah, another follow-up question about the calculation. I guess I'm worried that people might be making a decision that's not in their best interest. And I don't know if there's more information that we could give them. Like, say somebody has 9 years of service at VRS and VRS says, okay, that's worth $200,000 or whatever. I don't know what the number would be. And so you're backing into equivalent years of service at the city and say it's only 6. It seems like that would, it's just a function of the math. Like, it seems like if somebody is moving to the city and they plan on retiring from the city, that it would still make sense to port that 6 years of service if they have a higher salary and they're going to be able to combine that benefit and capitalize on that higher final average compensation. Are they just looking at the 6 versus 9 and saying, well, I'm not going to do that? Or is there anything else that we could give them to show, like, hey, I know it's only 6 years of service, but your benefit is going to be higher when you retire because it's based on more years of service total?
Can
Yeah, I think
jump
that's a
in
good-
on that real quick. So I've done several where we say, okay, we heard from VRS, you'll get 6. Let's use that example. We can do a pension estimate and let them know at age 65, here's what your benefit would be having transferred versus not. And that difference in their mind may not be enough to, they'd rather take the city pension at 65 in addition to their vested pension at VRS. It may be better for them. So we can definitely give them an estimate on top of just the years. Beyond that, I'm not sure what we could do.
Yeah.
For them.
I like that VRS benefit is frozen at their salary at that time, right?
Yeah, just like it would be for us. They have a vested benefit.
So Lisa, you said that people have the choice of between a defined benefit and defined contribution.
That's
So
correct.
if somebody takes the defined benefit, can they augment the contribution?
We offer a 457B plan to all employees. So if they want to save some more on their own, then they can start in a 457B account and fund it from their own pay. And we have a lot of people who do that in both plans, in the defined contribution and the defined benefit plan. Did anybody else have any questions about it?
I had another question.
Jason?
Oh, go ahead, Jason.
Oh, I was just going to ask, I saw a note on there in your summary that said ported service is not available to hybrid VRS members. Aren't all new employees at VRS in the hybrid plan? And does that mean that they're not eligible to port the DB portion of their retirement?
I'm pretty sure that public safety can be in the VRS defined benefit plan.
Got it.
So for new people who are not in public safety, you are correct.
I was gonna
But there are people who've participated in the defined benefit plan and VRS, years ago and come here, so.
I just wonder if we're at a point where, what we've heard over and over and over is the reason why people want to leave is because it's not so much when you're 25, it's not so much about the benefits you're getting at 65, it's what you're getting at the end of the week in your paycheck. And so part of the thing that makes, for public safety in particular, that makes that so expensive is the supplement. And so, maybe priorities have changed and maybe the supplement is not really the primary focus, and maybe there is an incentive to want to have more in your paycheck. And so I don't know what that would how we would do that, but it would be interesting to see what our plan choice would look like if a public safety person, like, how could we mirror our supplement to be like VRS? Or what would it look like if we said, look, a cost of a general employee to go in the DB plan is right now like 27% and some change versus a public safety person that's 50% and some change. What would it look like if we said, we're going to take that difference and we're going to adjust your pay on the front end and not put it in the pension? What are all the rippling effects of that? Because now our liability would go down. What would that look like, and how could we look at that analysis?
I think you got to understand, though, Chrissy, one of the problems is that those percentages of pay you're talking about that you contribute for the groups, a lot of that's funding the unfunded liability for the plan that's already there. A new person doesn't cost you 50% of pay. Okay. So
from a budgetary perspective, it does, right?
Right. But then if the new people weren't in the plan, the 50 would go up. So you'd get more of a, you see what I'm saying? It's really, the 50% is based on a dollar amount, which we just translate to a percentage of pay.
You're right.
And a lot of that 50% is paying off that unfunded liability, because even now you're only 70% funded, right? So the math would change if you had a whole bunch of people that were not in the plan. That rate would go up for the remaining people because you still got to get the same dollars for that.
It's the library issue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, again, it doesn't mean you shouldn't maybe consider that. You just got to understand the mix. It's like, I've got another locality looking at potentially moving all new employees to VRS, right? And you think, we're going to save a bunch of money. Well, you're not going to save any money in the short term, because 80% of your contribution is paying off your unfunded liability, and that doesn't change. Okay.
And you also lose control.
15, 20 years down the road, you might save some money, but it's not going to help next year's budget.
That's right.
But again, no reason you shouldn't always be thinking about plan design and how it might help you recruit and retain, obviously.
Right. And I guess you're looking at, if it is only 10 years before we're 100% funded and that unfunded liability goes away and our contribution is not going to that anymore, like, we're getting pretty close to that point. Granted, anything could happen, but there's only one pot of money for pay and benefits. And especially when it comes to public safety, a large portion of that is going to the retirement benefit. And so I guess it's just, for Joe and our public safety reps to be aware of that balance and to be able to have that conversation, I think is important.
Did anyone have any other questions?
No, Lisa, this is Joe Hatter. I do appreciate you guys looking into this. And I think, Jason, you hit it on the head. This can't, my understanding is this transaction cannot occur until an employee leaves and is hired in a similar job in a different locality. And then that's when they start the process of the portability. And, I just wanted to give people information up front before they make these decisions. my understanding is that they are not being given all the facts. And I just don't want somebody to make a bad decision, especially when they've got a long time here and then move over somewhere and lose some of that time. And so no, I appreciate it. I'm glad we had the discussion, and Lisa, thank you very much. And Sarah, you've been very helpful too. Basically saying, tell them to come talk to us one-on-one. And no, I appreciate it. And I thank you guys for engaging in this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, well, I think that wraps up that portion. So Bill, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and leave then.
All right.
You'll have a great day.
Yes.
Thanks.
Guys, have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye.
So the last item on the agenda, just a quick financial update. We did send out the quarterly report from DayHab for the quarter ending on September 30th. Just a quick note about that. Greg is going to be here next Thursday morning. If anyone wants to join that meeting, it's going to be first thing in the morning. So just shoot me an email if you're interested. There's, I guess, one other person could come since we can't have a full meeting. But if you would like to meet to go over the quarterly results in more detail, just let me know. We can try to work that out. And, oh, Scott, did you have a question?
What was the date of that meeting again?
It is going to be, I think it's the 9th.
9.
Yeah, Thursday the 9th. It'll be early in the morning,
How early is early?
like 8 o'clock maybe. He's got a
Yeah.
flight at 11:30, so.
Yeah, Jason, I can do that. The 9th at 8.
Yes.
Yeah, I can do that.
All right, cool.
So one person is is all?
I mean, we could talk about, if more people want to come, we could try to see what that might look like. Typically, if we're discussing investment managers, we would, if we're doing that in a meeting, we could go into a closed session to do that. But we could do that. I could work with Lisa to advertise the meeting if other people wanted to attend. But we would need to do, you're interested in coming, David?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let me try to figure out how we might be able to do that.
And Jason, I just looked at my family calendar, and I may not be able to do that after all.
Okay.
So before you do that, give me an hour to text
Okay.
my wife and understand. I think she's traveling for work, but I will let you know in an hour.
Okay. Yeah, no, that sounds good.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so just a quick note on that. Our fiscal year started on July 1st. So these results were just one quarter into the fiscal year. It looks like the net return was about 0.3%, so 300 basis points. And October was positive. I think the fund was up just under 4% in October, and then sort of sideways in November. So it's just a really volatile time period, and we're not even halfway through the fiscal year, so not too much to read into. But yeah, we'll definitely talk to Greg, and if you have any questions or anything that you want me to ask him, just let me know and shoot me an email, and we'll try to let you know more after that meeting.
Jason? I kind of tended to focus on certain pages in that 171 page thing. Specifically, I think like 10, 11, 12, 13.
Okay.
It's a summary. So I was looking at, and I recall having kind of similar conversations in the past with Greg and yourself, but the fund has always done quite well. But when I look at timeframes that are closer to now, not 10 years, 5 years, but 3 years, 1 year, it looks to me like it's going in the wrong direction in terms of its ranking. It's still high, but it's not like it appeared to be in the past. Does that bother you at all?
David, are you referring to the when you say ranking, as it has been in the past, what are you referring to? Just so I understand what you're saying.
So on page 10, at the very top,
Yeah.
the very first line. So the return over 10 years puts us in the top 5%, and ditto for 5, but 3 it's 16 and 1 it's 21.
Mm-hmm.
I can never make sense when I look down below at the specific components of that whole thing, how you somehow end up in the top 5% when nothing has performed even close to that. But I have to accept that that's the case. But it just kind of going in a direction.
And this has to do largely with our asset allocation, which is we are more broadly diversified than a lot of people are. And so we should, when you have a big upswing year like we did last year, we've got this broadly diversified portfolio. We're not going to be all the way at the top in a really rip roaring year. We also shouldn't be all the way down at the bottom in a fall off the cliff year, right? But over the long term, this broadly balanced portfolio should do pretty well. So it's not surprising to me that our 1 year number in a year like last year is not as high as our ranking, quote unquote, over 5 or 10 years.
And I tend to put more credence in longer terms myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I almost never look at a 1 year return of anything,
Mm-hmm.
but I do look at direction.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I think, generally we have not selected sort of the run and gun managers who are gonna, be really heavily concentrated in certain stocks or sectors of the market. Though I would agree with Ben, it's not surprising that over the last year, we do have some managers who have underperformed individually against their individual benchmark. I think another thing that you're seeing here is that, a majority of those rankings are derived from our overall asset allocation and not necessarily the individual fund managers that we've selected. So we've been in the right asset classes, fortunately, over that 10-year period. So even if we have an individual manager who time to time underperforms their benchmark, compared to other public pension plans, we've done well on a relative basis.
Yeah. I'm honestly surprised we're in the 80th percentile over the past year, right? And these numbers are kind of funny to talk about because it's saying, I think, Jason, correct me, over the 1 year, and I'm looking at page 10, that 21% of other funds outperformed us.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So we are in the 79th percentile. We're in the 79th percentile with a broadly diversified basket, and honestly, that's the surprising thing for me. I would have expected us to be lower than that. It's great, but that's the surprising takeaway for me.
Yeah, and I think that's largely the asset allocation. If you look at
Mm-hmm.
Public plans who are either 60-40 or 70-30, 10% of our portfolio is in real estate, and it was up 16% last year.
Yeah.
So our bond portfolio was up 200 basis points. So from an asset basis, that's going to be a big driver of the relative performance.
And you can see on page 16, our actual percentage allocations versus targets, and we're overweight on all the things that have done well. And we're overweight because they've done well, right? And underweight on the things that haven't. So,
So
Greg's not
that
on this call, right? Greg's not on this call.
No, no.
I mean, I keep being skeptical of that guy. It's like he can't. It's a public meeting, but you know, I keep being skeptical of that guy, but they keep returning these numbers. You know, I don't know what to say.
Ben, I did notice the weighting, where the large cap is overweight and the fixed income is underweight by almost the same amount.
It's been great. It's done great.
But going forward, is that what you want to do?
You think rates going up or rates going down?
I think rates are going to go up.
And you don't want to own fixed income, or probably overweight fixed income. Honestly, Jason's like, "Oh no, Ben, don't do this." But I mean, yeah, I mean, we're overweight equities and underweight fixed income. That's been a good place to be.
True.
Been a good place to be. Jason, I don't know. These guys are doing great. I mean,
Yeah, it's hard to argue with. And that's with, several $1 million of rebalancing over the last 6 months. So,
yeah. Yeah.
All right, well, we'll sort out the meeting details and let everyone know what we decide today or tomorrow. Any other items that we need to discuss? There's no meeting later this month, right?
No, but I did want to say, I'm not sure if, because I think Heather had to leave and I'm not sure if she called in. But either way, this is her last meeting, so I just wanted to say thank you to Heather, and even if she's not here, that we're gonna miss having her on the commission.
We'll put that in the minutes. Thank you, Heather.
Right. Thanks
Yeah.
to Heather. And
I
then
can-
the last thing I wanted to say is that it's possible that City Hall will be open to visitors in January. So if that's the case, then we're going to be meeting face to face at the end of January. So
Yes.
once
yes.
I know for sure, I will send an email out to the commission so that you can prepare for that.
So Lisa, on that, I hate doing this, by the way, this way, but things aren't going in the right direction.
Well, this is not a decision I'm going to make. So
Just
I
saying.
think it's a wait and see kind of thing. I just wanted to put it out there.
You think we could look at reserving city space for that January meeting, just since we would have more room? I would prefer to avoid the
Spread
basement
out.
conference room.
I'm happy to look into that.
And my understanding, part of that has to do with the emergency declaration and the ability to meet virtually. And so if the declaration ends, then we would lose our ability to meet virtually, and we would be required to meet in person if we met, I think.
Correct.
Lisa, Public Works has a meeting room that would accommodate this number of people spread out well too.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Scott.
Lisa, it's Ashley. Also, the Parks and Rec conference room is fairly large and sizable, so you'd be popping right under city space, just to give you options in the future.
I love options, so thank you.
Mhm.
So I will get back to everyone in January once we have more information on that. Okay?
Great. Thanks for all your work, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Do we have a motion
Very
to
welcome.
adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
David and Chris. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Holidays.